thoughts on how consumer behaviour will be affected long term in the current recession?
Well, I think to answer that rather obliquely, I think short term it's all about sort of value, trust, safety, security, and we're seeing an interest in quite nostalgic products, for example, because I think they're seen as relatively sort of safe. The question at the moment is very difficult to answer because we've never been quite in this situation before, and it's unclear at the moment whether it's going to play out. I mean, I'll give you two scenarios. I mean, one scenario is we come out of this quite quickly, and I personally think this is going to happen. I think 2-3 years, I think we're sort of looking okay. Now, if that happens, I suspect we will possibly move back to our sort of wild and wicked old ways quite quickly, and it'll just be almost business as usual. We'll have very sort of short memories. If this is a sustained recession, if this is sort of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of grief, I think that could sort of fundamentally change how operate. I mean, I've got a sort of couple of scenarios. One is to do with Mooreism, and that's where we've been, and maybe we will go back to. I like talking about this scenario called enoughism, and it's about people questioning the system. It's about saying, I've got enough, and particularly I've had enough. Things have got to change. It's people sort of looking for balance. The group is quite important. Again, safety and security is quite important. I think one thing that's going to come through quite strongly, probably in all scenarios, but particularly if it gets very nasty, is this whole sort of thing of attaching social, environmental, ethical behaviour to brands. I mean, values, in the old-fashioned sense of the word, I think become incredibly important. And that's to some extent to do with fairness. To some extent, I'm talking about the environment, etc., etc.
Thank you. And how do you and have you seen this in your own sector?
Depends what you mean by my own sector.
Well, I kind of mean retail, but I guess.
There's a demand for futurists at the moment, which is quite interesting, and I think that's linked to the level of uncertainty and the sort of speed of change. And the great joke there, of course, is that no futurists saw it coming, and people trying to anticipate what's going to happen next. And it is incredibly volatile at the moment. I mean, the very recent thing with the global flu pandemic, which wasn't, it was more of an anxiety pandemic, is born of our connectivity and our anxiety and all of that kind of thing. And at the moment, I think there's an awful lot of fence sitting going on. But I think you've got to sort of think beyond the next 18, 24 months. I mean, I'm still thinking of oil at 200 a barrel, even 300 a barrel, and how that changes the world. And that's not gone away. That's coming back, I promise you. And that would fundamentally change things like logistics, supply chains. I mean, how do you operate a supply chain on $250 a barrel oil? I mean, it potentially has a situation where we might start relocalizing manufacturing and consumption. It might go back to how it was 50 or even 100 years ago, which could get quite interesting. And actually, oil at 150 a barrel isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's become much more local. I think community would come to the fore and all that sort of stuff. And I think there is a bit of a bottleneck to get through, but ultimately we'll sort of be okay.
Thank you. Perfect. Do you believe marketing skills need to change, and if so?
I think there's a couple of obvious ones. A very, very significant change, particularly if you're looking at time spans of the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, is ageing. I'm talking about the sort of 55, 60-year-old plus customer. Now, the problem is most marketing departments are run by people in their 20s and 30s, and I don't think they really are walking in the shoes of your average 75-year-old, who very possibly lives alone, has arthritic hands, can't open half the stuff at the supermarket. Most supermarkets sell stuff with an assumption of families or couples. Walking in there as a single person, a lot of stuff just doesn't fit the way you live and the way you think, and even opening half the products is actually quite tricky if you've got sort of arthritic hands. I mean, I struggle with the sort of shrink wrap DVDs already, so God knows what it's going to be like in another sort of 20 or 30 years. So I think that's a really, really important one to do something about, and to actually start creating products and services that properly address the needs of 65-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, even 90-year-olds, which we'll get an awful lot more of in the future. The other thing, I suppose, would be, due to sort of digitalization and connectivity, much greater transparency in the future. So it's difficult to get away with stuff that's a bit dodgy. So I think much more openness on the part of brands about things like how things are made, where they come from, under what sort of circumstances. I mean, I like talking about sort of industrial provenance. It's almost like the language of a bottle of wine applied to washing machines and airplane parts. You know, where's this from? What's its story? How is it made? When? Where? Under what conditions? And so on. I think there's a sort of thirst for that kind of knowledge because people are a little bit cynical about things. And you know, if a T-shirt's very cheap, why is it so cheap? How are you able to do that? Are there any sort of costs associated with it that I might be sort of unhappy about? So I think much more sort of ethically, socially, environmentally driven, much more open. To some extent, things co-created with customers, getting them involved in the production of goods and services, although I think there's a limit to where that can go. People are busy, they don't necessarily have the skills to do that. There's a real issue at the moment, I think, and it's going to get worse in the near future, with there's just too much information and too much choice. So I think people are looking for people to edit things for them and to say, look, for you, this is the best choice, or the best 2 or 3 choices. You don't need 40 brands of toothpaste in the supermarket. It's just completely out of control.
What do you think categorises the strongest brands these days?
I think authenticity is incredibly important. I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer because it depends on the geography, your consumer, your all sorts of things. But I think authenticity is becoming extremely important. Trust is generally very important. Convenience is a pretty major driver in most markets, so speed and convenience. Price at the moment, although I guess that'll never sort of really go away particularly.
Thank you. And then I'll try it. How do you intend to keep your brand strong for the next 50 years?
Referring to my personal brand. I think it's important to have, you have to be online, there's no question about that. I think you have to give things away for free. People expect things that are online to be free to a certain extent. You've got to allow people to sort of play around with things a little bit. I am actually a huge fan of the physical. I think that the more the life speeds up and becomes virtual, the more people will seek to slow things down, and the more they'll be sort of drawn to physical objects. So I'm really interested in physical objects, be they books, reports. I'm interested in doing live talks and so on and so forth. And it's interesting, in my own case, I have a free trends report online. Most people don't read it. They seem to phone me up and ask if I can come and read it to them in person, of which they'll pay me to do that, which is kind of weird, really. But and I think that's to do with personalisation and, to some extent, rather weirdly, scarcity. And just really, I suppose my whole business is trying to track what's going on, so constantly looking around, trying to find what's going on, being curious, trying to look for connections, talking to people, travelling as much as I can, and just endlessly asking questions about why things are the way they are, or the way they might be that way.